In JavaScript, prototypes are the mechanism by which objects inherit features from one another. But what does that even mean? Let's create an empty object called dog. If we log this to the console, we see it has none of its own properties, but it has this Proto property. Let's add some properties: a name, Marty, and an age of 12. When we log the dog object again, we see it has its own properties, name and age, but this Proto is still there. So let's see. If we call dog.name, it logs Marty. If we call dog.breed, it's undefined, which makes sense since we never added it to the object when we created it. However, if we call dog.toString, it's not undefined. It logs object, even though we never defined it when we created the object. Now, looking under the Proto, we see that toString is defined as a method. So essentially, every object in JavaScript has a built-in property called its prototype, from which it can inherit other properties and methods. The prototype itself is an object, so it will have its own prototype, forming what's called a prototype chain. The chain ends when we reach a prototype that has null as its own prototype. It's confusing, so let's look at some examples. We create an array called books with Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. Logging this shows it's inheriting from the array prototype, which holds methods such as find and index of. To see an object's prototype, we can simply log the proto property or use the object.getPrototypeOf method. Both show the same thing. If we keep going down this prototype chain, we see that an array inherits from the object prototype, and so on until we get to null. Similarly, if we create a variable name and assign it the string Larry, we see it's inheriting methods from the string prototype, which will have its own chain. Here's the cool thing. We don't have to use only the prototypes already built into JavaScript. We can set our own objects as prototypes. Let's see how we can do this. Suppose we have an animal object with a method talk that logs a noise. We can create a dog object, but this time, instead of using an object literal, we use object.create and pass in the prototype we want it to have, like our animal object. Logging our dog object shows its prototype is an object with the talk method, and if we call dog.talk, it logs noise. What if we added a talk method to the dog object that logs woof? Now if we call dog.talk, it logs woof. This is because JavaScript will search the calling object for the method or property first, and if it can't find it there, it will go up the prototype chain until it does. Initially, talk was not defined on the dog object itself, so it used the animal prototypes definition. But now, since dog has a talk method, it uses that one instead. Similarly, if we call dog.fly, it throws an error because neither it nor none of its prototypes have a property or method named fly. Now that we understand Proto, what actually is a prototype? Well, prototype is a property defined on the constructor function, while a proto is on the instance of the object itself. For example, if we have a constructor function person that takes a name and we create a person Bob named Bob, calling bob.prototype will be undefined, but calling bob.proto shows its prototype, since Bob is the instance holding the object. Similarly, since person is the actual function, we can call person.prototype, and if we set bob.proto equal to bob.prototype, we see it comes back as true. Essentially, these are just two ways to access the prototype from different ends. And that's a wrap on JavaScript prototypes. They allow objects to inherit from one another. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, happy coding.